Welcome to our Climate Wisdom live stream from COP29 Climate Change Conference in Baku, Azerbaijan. We bring together experts from faith, from civil society, science and policymaker. We bring them together for a meaningful conversation in the midst of a world in crisis, to care, to share and to inspire. My name is Sonja Ohlsson and I will be the moderator of tonight's session. We have the theme, the power of positive action tonight. And we have just entered the second week of the climate change conference. And today the ministers have arrived here in Baku and they are going to finalize the agreements and the text of the new climate change agreements, and it has been difficult for negotiators to reach a conclusion in the past week. So now the whole global audience, all activists, they are urging the politicians to come to an agreement. So we are looking forward to see what will come out of this second week. So let me welcome our guests in the studio here tonight. So a warm welcome to Mark Lawrence. You are the Scientific Director of RIFS, and RIFS is Research Institute for Sustainability. And a warm welcome to Sister Jayanti, the Additional Administrative Head of Brahma Kumaris. I'm very happy to have you here together tonight because you represent science and silence. So let's see what will come into this conversation. And Sister Jayanti, you've been representing the Brahma Kumaris in the UN since the mid-80s. So you have over 40 years of experience in UN work for peace, for women, for climate change. And you've been the head of our delegation to the Climate Change Conference since 2009. And we know you as a spiritual teacher and faith leader for plus 50 years. And Mark, you are the Scientific Director of RIFS, and you have a background in atmospheric science, and you've done extensive research in planetary health, and also the link between personal and systemic transformation. And having had such long career in scientific climate research, what drives you to come to the climate change conferences? Because as we know, the politicians are not really listening to science, are they? And they are not listening to spirituality either. But and I met a colleague of yours the other day from Potsdam, and he says that it takes a lot of spiritual maturity to come to these conferences. He found them quite horrible. So what makes you come here, Mark, and what are you looking forward to for the coming week?
Well, first off, thank you, Sonja, and thank you, Sister Jayanti, for the invitation to join you here in this discussion. And you're quite right. When I am planning and packing and preparing and then also being at the climate conferences, the question comes up, what am I doing here? Is it really worth it for this effort? And of course, each time we judge that anew and come to our conclusions about whether it's sensible to join again. So far, we have decided that it is sensible to come each time, despite the effort, despite the environmental costs that are involved, despite the personal effort that is involved, and despite indeed, my colleague's quite right, it's sort of a jungle, and it's a fashion show, and it's a show-off place, and it's a tug of war over principles, and it's a challenging environment to exist in.
And it's a tug of war over the audience also.
Oh yes, absolutely. It's a tug of war over so many things, but I do think it is in many ways worth being here for three reasons that I continue to come to the COPs. One of them is to have the small impact that we have. And we recognize it is a small impact, but I would differ a little bit about the politicians, and I would say they do, many of them, not all, but many of them do listen to scientists carefully. Many of them do listen to religious leaders. Many of them do listen to other sectors of society. but they're in the middle of this situation where it's so hard for them to take that information and bring it together and actually decide how they're going to act. And at the same time, they also have to consider their voters. And so it may seem like they're not listening, but I've watched over the years how the messages of many policymakers actually become more nuanced. They become more informed. And it becomes clear to me, yes, some of them that I've interacted with for many years have really been listening, and they have actually begun to apply that knowledge. And the same for others that they have listened to. So that's a small part of the impact that we have. And the impact that we have being in panel discussions and in other forms of dialogues, individual discussions, and even in studio events, where we can share our insights and our wisdom and our inspiration with others. So
and
that's a small impact. Yes, the two others are learning. And learning from how other people approach the issue and what challenges others see in the issue. Not only learning from those who are in favor of trying to bring along climate protection, but also for those who have reasons for being more skeptical and doubtful, and learning what's behind them. And the third is forming networks. And that's so important because each of us has a little impact here. And if we all have this little impact and it's going in different directions, it doesn't help nearly as much as when we start to work together. And those who are oriented on common good coming together and orienting on that together in a network and trying to bring our way forward will help us better than if we don't. It may not be perfect, it may not have reached the degree that we wish for it to be, but it's certainly better than if we had not been making this effort.
So thank you. So you come here to make a small impact, to learn and to form a network. Interesting. And I have the same question for you, Sister Jayanti, because last year in Dubai, when Sister Jayanti came, she said, "This is my last COP." And after 1 week, you changed your mind, and here we are again, and I'm very happy to have you in the delegation, and welcome. But what makes you come back and stick to this process now for nearly 20 years?
I've also been seeing the impact of spirituality on the gathering. And sometimes it's individuals who are impacted, sometimes it's groups. And the last couple of years, it's been through the studio, which has a huge outreach, not only at this moment, but even later. Many people watch the sessions on that. And so I feel that if there's a little contribution I can make to amplify that sound to wake up people, because I do feel that it's as if the scientists have been saying one thing and people at that moment seem to be listening, but yet they're not actually registering what's being said. And it's not powerful enough to make them sit up and say, well, what can we do? The other aspect is that I've been seeing the intensity of climate upheaval across the world. And you see it on your television screens. I hear it from personal communication with our centers across the world. And it gets more and more sad, more and more traumatic for people. And so I feel this urgency, this motivation to be able to wake up people, and in particular leaders. I really wish that the leaders would wake up and take note of what the scientists are saying. With Christiana Figueres, I miss her a lot because she was the one who brought in officially the whole subject of faith leaders. And so we're grateful for that. But again, whatever it is we say, at that moment, they'll nod their head in agreement. And now I'm not just talking about leaders, but people who come and listen to us, because early days, it used to be 20, 25 people who would come to our panels. Now it's much larger numbers that come, but yet still somehow there's a part that, you hear the alarm bell go and you say, I'm going to get up, but you switch it off and then you turn around and go back to sleep again. And it really feels as if that's what's happening.
This snooze function.
That's it. And so I really would love to be here at a time when people do acknowledge that we need to take positive action.
Thank you. And I was sharing with the group this morning that this year we have been invited to guide meditation in 4 places, the first time ever in the COP. So things are moving. And from about dialogue now, Mark, I know you and your team, you've done research into the dialogue formats, the co-creative dialogue space at the COP conferences for many years, and its connection, dialogue, and the result, productive results. Can you share some of your findings and also some of your suggestions? Because both of you have programs lined up this week. Is there any practical steps for dialogue and conversation that can be useful in this coming week?
Yes, well, thank you for asking about that. And that connects a little bit into what Sister Jayanti said also about people giving the impression that it goes in one ear and comes right out the other.
Yeah.
And when you're sitting in a plenary discussion, the 5th one of the day, and it's really interesting what you're hearing, but you can only get so much in if you're just listening to it. Maybe you get to ask one question at the end, and maybe one of the panelists will actually respond to the question rather than responding what they want to say. And this disturbed us quite a bit years ago. And with a couple of our colleagues, especially Caroline Fraude, who took the lead on it, and Tom Brun from my team, and Katie Marr, and several colleagues from other organizations, we decided to try to do something about this and experiment around what other kinds of dialogue might go deeper. And so since the COP in Katowice in 2018, every year after that, we rented a room, and made a sort of a small dialogue pavilion. And we would run sessions 3 to 4 times a day, and then have guest sessions in. And in our sessions, we focus very specifically on understanding the communication culture at the COP. And we would sort of take a journey through the week of learning about how people viewed communication and what we could do to help improve communication. And we ran surveys and interviews, and we've written scientific papers and policy briefs and other papers around this, and have learned a lot of lessons over the years from that. Last year was the last year we've done that. We feel like we've learned what we can, and we're starting to apply this in other formats and share it with others here who are interested in applying it. Lessons, for instance, very obvious lessons like the setting matters. How you set up a room to encourage dialogue, if you're set up with a panel discussion in the front, or if you're set up in a circle of chairs, if there's a table thing in the middle, or if it's open, makes a big difference.
This would be nice in copy.
Absolutely, this is what we did with not only circle dialogues, but with different settings, so we could learn. The facilitation matters. There are many different types of facilitation techniques, like appreciative inquiry and various other types of fishbowl and dialogues and so on. And you can make use of well-established facilitation principles to actually facilitate a better discussion than you have out of a standard panel discussion. Networks are important, and forming networks that help you, so it's not just a single effort, but others are growing this. But then other things that were less obvious. And one of my favorites that we found as a lesson was that don't let the imperfection of the setting and of the situation get in the way of doing the dialogue. You may have a facilitation concept in mind, it won't work in this setting. And you have to be ready to try to change it on site, in action, and move with it. And at the same time, make that imperfection, make that challenging setting, make that fear that it brings out in people, and that concern, and those challenged emotions, make that an object of discussion. Allow people to actually be explicit about it. Not that they have to be big and strong and that nothing bothers them, they can go through any session, but that they can actually have a safe space to talk about it with others. And then finally, a really odd one that we learned, it's very valuable to have an in-between person. When people come into a session, have one person who's, besides the facilitators and moderators, that's assigned to bringing people in, to helping to spin them up and into the session, so that you don't disturb the session, but that you get people that want to join later spun up quickly on it. And so all these fascinating lessons we've learned, and many more that we've put together, and we're very glad to share them, because we would like to see others take advantage of this knowledge and try to improve the communication culture at the COPs. That's one step towards unleashing the potential that we have to do good together.
Yeah, to create safe spaces is very important. And I like this, to make the despair and anxiety a focus of the discussion, also to voice it. Continue on this note of dialogue, Sister Jayanti. You are the head of a big, huge international organization, so you know the importance of dialogue and communication. And here in COP, I've heard some people saying that the only thing that gives them hope is also dialogue. And how will you communicate hope in this coming week in your sessions and side events? How can we incorporate the topic of hope in dialogue?
So many people are scared about what the future holds. I feel that there's a culture of fear that is becoming stronger and stronger. Young people have a question, well, do we have a future? And it's things like this that are being talked about, or at least they're there under the surface, even if they're not openly voiced by some people. And spirituality teaches me a very, very simple lesson. And that is, yes, we're here today because of the things that we've done in the past, but at the moment, I have total choice. I can choose what it is I wish to do. And if I make the right choices at this moment, through my thinking, my speaking, and my doing, and all of those things are aligned in one direction, then I know what the future is, because I'm creating it today. And so if today we decide to turn things around and move in a different direction and go towards sustainability or renewal, then we can do that. And so this is what offers me hope for the future, knowing that, and it's not even actually hope as such, more it's the conviction that the things we do today are going to determine my future. And our future collectively depends on, as we come together and learn to cooperate together, and there's this understanding amongst people, we can create the future of the choice that we have, of the worlds that we would like to have for ourselves and the next generations.
Interesting, because what often creates anxiety is that when you feel powerless, you feel you have nothing to do, nothing action, there is no action I can take, but here I can have a choice to think or to act or to speak in a certain way, and that gives hope.
Yeah, it's like when, they hear that there's 1,700 plus lobbyists who are going to be part of the whole scenario, then you feel paralyzed. Well, what can we do in the face of that? But no, not at all. They'll do what they need to do, but we can do better. But I think that one is dialogue and the other is that conscious ability to cooperate together, where we're able to overcome the egos of the limited identity of my this, my that, my the other. And when we go beyond that, then the quality of cooperation that comes together is what's going to create a better world for the future.
I think this is also what you mentioned, like the working together in unity. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I heard you saying many times, Mark, that not let the perfect be in the way of the good. And I like that very much, because I often think if I have to be 100% peaceful all the time, before I start teaching peace, I will never start teaching peace because I'm a meditation teacher. So if I have to be 100% peaceful all the time, I will never teach, right? So, but do you have an example of this, or a personal example of not let perfect be in the way of good?
Oh, sure. I have many examples. So I often phrase it as don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Okay,
so
yes.
I put it even more adversarially, but in the way of the
Yeah.
good is also a very good way. So there are many examples of that. Let's take one on the big picture, what we were just talking about, the climate conferences. So now we have almost 2,000 lobbyists at the climate conference. That's certainly not the perfect side. We would like to have a perfect climate conference where it's just the people who are focused on the common good orientation and on climate protection and of course the different needs and different situations in different countries, but that have a common good orientation. But if we say, well, now the lobbyists have invaded the conference, it's not perfect anymore, let's just quit it. Let's stop, let's not even bother to go. I'm not going to go to this because there are more lobbyists. I think there's still more actually spiritual leaders here and spiritual representatives, probably, than lobbyists. There's more indigenous, there's more scientists probably than lobbyists here. But it's one of these examples where people say, I've heard people saying, well, if there's that many lobbyists here, I don't see the sense in me going. It's not worth it anymore. And I do feel that this connection that you just talked about, and that we all feel, we can bring that out and we can do something with that here. The issue came about in the first place when somebody asked me, or many people actually asked me, how can I live sustainably? And while I was working on trying to write my thoughts of that down into an article, I realized this is going to scare off every single person who reads this. And so I had this principle as the last principle. I turned it around and I made that the first principle. Because the idea is, if you want to live, you don't live sustainably anyway. You live in support of sustainability.
Yeah, that's good.
And even that is difficult. You know, it's so difficult to find a suit that is made with sustainable principles. It is so difficult when you're traveling sometimes to find food that's made with sustainable principles. It's so difficult to work in ways that are following sustainable principles, that are respecting our bodies and minds and souls and those of those around us, that are doing it perfectly. But if we give up just because I say, well, I can't find an entire outfit that is sustainable, so I won't bother with it at all. That's where I say, no, do what we can, as far as you can, and don't worry that it's not perfect. Worry that it's not as good as you can do. And keep continuing that effort and doing what we can do together until this world becomes maybe not perfect, but glorious.
Thank you very much. Very beautiful, like power talk to all of us. When we get influenced by the conference atmosphere sometimes and maybe lose hope, it's very stressful out there. So let us do the little bit we can. And also to the audience listening to this now, what positive action can I do today or tomorrow that have a small impact? Everyone can think of this. So it's been coming towards the end of our conversation, so we can ask Sister Jayanti to guide a meditation on hope, maybe, to finish this way. Yeah,
Sure.
Thank you.
I reflect on the things I've been hearing about and ask myself the question, is there something I could do that can support myself in my spiritual journey, but also all the things that I do in the world out there, so that we move towards a better future? And as I go deeper and deeper inside myself, I connect with my own original values. And I realize that the things I was looking for outside are actually within me. Deep within myself is that sacred space where there is peace. While I was searching for peace out there, I wasn't able to find it. But now, going deeper and deeper within myself, I realize that peace is my natural state of being. Peace is who I am. And as I become peaceful, I realize that peace is not static. Peace is an energy that can radiate out there. And if I stay connected with my inner state of peace, I can share vibrations of peace with all those around me, but also as two, and 10, and a few more come together. The vibrations multiply, and the power of peace reaches out into the world. And this little experiment gives me hope for the future. Personally, individually, I rediscover peace and joy, truth and love within myself. But I know that there are many others on the same journey. And as our vibrations multiply, I know for sure that together we can create a world in which there is peace, harmony, and love for humanity, but also for all forms of life and nature itself. And together we move towards a better world for all. Om Shanti.
Thank you very much for meditation. This brings us to the end of our conversation about positive action, unity, solidarity, hope, and many communication. So thanks, warm thanks to both of you, and thanks to our audience and listeners. Also thanks to our patrons and supporters and the volunteers who make this live stream possible. Please stay with us. We will now have a 5 minutes break, and we will show a video which will introduce our next speaker in part 2. And otherwise you will also have a new live stream tomorrow evening, and you can find more information on our webpage echo.brahmakumaris.org. So thank you very much, and good evening from Baku.